Since taking the gavel as House Speaker back in October of 2023, Mike Johnson has faced one of the most challenging roles in Washington, D.C. Being Speaker of the House, period, is a very challenging role. He has had to lead a razor-thin Republican majority. He's navigated internal party divisions, Democrat opposition, and high-stake legislative battles that somehow he has come out on the right side of most every time. And yet, time and time again, Johnson just keeps winning. He secured his speakership in one vote in 2024. I guess it would be early 2025. He won that in. He was able to push through the initial framework for Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. He was able to push through a continuing resolution to fund the government until September of 2025. And now, officially, as of this morning, he has passed Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill through the House of Representatives with a razor-thin majority. I mean, the vote was 215 to 214. Two Republicans, Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Warren Davidson of Ohio, voted no. Andy Harris of Maryland voted present. A huge legislative accomplishment for the Republican Party and some huge hurdles that were overcome here. Now, taking a step back, Johnson was reelected as House Speaker back on January 3rd with a tight 218 to 215 vote. And he overcome an initial dissent from hardline Republicans like Ralph Northam, like Keith Self, Thomas Massie. After President Trump endorsed him and personal phone calls really trying to nudge these holdouts, like Chip Roy was very pivotal in flipping these votes, showcasing Johnson's ability to leverage Trump's influence. Ultimately, they are on the same page here. There's a lot of people in the Trump realm that are not very fond of Mike Johnson, but you have to give Mike Johnson credit here. He has got this pushed through the House of Representatives with a razor-thin majority. He could only afford just a handful of defections, and he's navigated conservative rebellion, people like Victoria Spartz, people like Chip Roy, people like Warren Davidson. It's very, very hard to navigate a body of 218 people and to get them all on the same page for a massive reconciliation bill. Not only initially that he was able to get the framework passed through for the One Big Beautiful Bill, but now that we know that it is passed, after initially it had to pass through the Budget Committee, I believe yesterday that it passed through. It initially failed on Sunday when there were some holdouts and there were some changes that some of it is public. We know that they sped up the timeline on which Medicaid states will be able to or will be required to check Medicaid recipients' incomes more than once a year, either once a year to twice a year, once every 6 months. Obviously, some big changes. They needed to make deep cuts here. They needed to make deep cuts to Medicaid because why should you have an able-bodied human being sitting on their ass collecting Medicaid, being able to get benefits from Medicaid? That is not the purpose of Medicaid. Some of these work requirements will now require them to just put in 20 hours of work. If you don't know, I do YouTube and I also have a full-time job. I probably work 80, 85, 90 hours a week. Last night I was up until 3:30 in the morning getting all my videos ready for today. 20 hours a week, that's like Tuesday. It's like Tuesday at noon. It's like Tuesday at 3 o'clock. Like the fact that working 20 hours a week is a hurdle for some people just shows how berserk, how wild things are in America right now. That you have men and women who aren't going to work. And I'm not talking about people who are disabled. I'm talking about able-bodied human beings. Medicaid is here to provide health care for low-income individuals and vulnerable groups of people, including children, pregnant women, the elderly, people with disabilities. It's not here for some 25-year-old who doesn't want to work, who wants to play video games all day and sit on his ass all day. That's not what Medicaid's for. And so, I would have been fine if these requirements went into place at the end of 2025, not 2026. I think 2026 is too far away. But ultimately, initially in the bill, it was not going to be implemented until 2029. But ultimately, like we said, you have to give Johnson a lot of credit here. Successfully guiding President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill to a House floor vote, which is really landmark legislation that will advance Donald Trump's America First agenda. This gives Trump what he wants, what he campaigned on. It's going to give us no taxes on tips. I'm kind of a little disappointed in the no taxes on Social Security. It's only a $4,000 deduction ultimately, but still, it is something They're still moving. We're renewing the Trump tax cuts. We're deepening the Trump tax cuts. But ultimately, this is not a fiscally responsible bill. Like, let's not sit here and kid ourselves. This is not a fiscally responsible bill. But the reality is that Americans, they say they want a fiscally responsive bill or responsible bill. They say they want government funding. We need to reduce government fund or spending. But then when you ask them where, they don't know where. They don't want to cut anything. Too much government dependency. Too much of it. But yes, in this bill, it includes historic tax cuts right here. Really cutting wasteful spending. Preventing the largest tax increase in U.S. history. You would have seen probably a, 40, 50, 60% tax increase overnight at the end of 2025 if this does not pass. It starts to phase out certain green energy tax credits. It invests in our national defense, our homeland security, reestablishes American energy independence. And they say restores common sense in the government, which I don't think it really does because it's not a fiscally responsible bill. It gives Trump what he campaigned on. There's no doubt about that. And this is arguably one of the most significant pieces of legislation that Trump has passed outside of his historic 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Like, this goes even deeper. This goes even further than what we saw in 2017. And like we said, the fact that he had to face opposition from both conservatives in the Freedom Caucus and moderate Republicans, you need to balance on both sides. You start to, inflate the balloon on one side. It starts to deflate on the other side. It's kind of this balancing act that Johnson has really had to deal with. They also, to appease more moderates in high state tax, basically in blue states, you could say, like New York and California, where they have high state income taxes, pushed for higher state and local tax deductions. Now, Johnson was able to come up with a compromise where they raised the cap on the SALT deductions from $10,000 to $40,000 for people who make under $500,000, which is going to be huge. And like we said, with a 1-vote margin at the time, Johnson's last-minute amendments during a 21-hour Rules and House Committee session to unify his party passed the bill on an 8-4 vote in the Budget Committee. Ultimately, like we said, went to the House 215 to 214. He has been working his tail off from here. He really has been. But ultimately, we know that this will go to the Senate, and not everything that's in there is going to stay. The Senate is ultimately going to make some changes. The Senate is a much different body, a legislative body, than the House of Representatives. They are going to make a lot of changes to this bill here. It's obviously going to have to be passed through the Senate, their version, sent back to the House, and the House and the Senate are going to have to vote on a new version, which could be difficult. But simply the fact that he got it this far, this quickly, he deserves some credit. Obviously, a lot of work to be done. The Senate's going to take this up. The House is going to have to really reconcile with the Senate's version. Where can they come to an agreement here? Not only do you have to come to an agreement within your party, inside of your chamber, but then you have to come to an agreement with the other chamber. And then you have to vote on it again, which could be a pretty big feat. But ultimately, with the help of Donald Trump, Donald Trump was on the phone with the Freedom Caucus. He was on Capitol Hill really trying to push the people who were potentially holdouts to drop it, to say, nope, we're going to vote for this bill right here. So ultimately, huge credit to Mike Johnson. We're going to see what he's able to get done after this. But like we said, massive, massive, massive victory for the Speaker of the House in a very, very closely divided House of Representatives. Plus, the fact that there's a faction of his party who would oust him if Donald Trump would allow it to happen. They would do anything to oust him. So we're going to see what happens. But ultimately, that is going to wrap things up for today, folks. Drop down below, hit that subscribe button, make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. And folks, we will catch you next time.